Welcome to my channel. Today we'll look at the 3 top tips on how to save a relationship. A broken relationship is a painful experience and can cause a lot of stress. A connection, intimacy and supportive relationship is both what give us the support to make the most of our life and also what provide the biggest boost to our well-being. When we think about how to fix a relationship, we often think about what we can do to influence or control the situation. The need to control comes from a place of fear, and fear comes from a place of scarcity. So, before giving you the 3 tips to fix your relationship, I want to address a myth that causes us to fear losing a relationship in the first place. Not because I don't think your relationship is worth saving, but because once we get rid of the fear, we can actually relate much better. And is that not what relationships are about? Relating. We grow up learning this fairy tale of the one, and believe there's one person for us out there. This scarcity mentality causes fear of loss, and with it a long line of self-destructive behaviors such as trying to control and inhibit our partner. It causes judgment of sides of our partner that we fear that we can't actually fulfill. All these shuts down connection and causes couples to move apart. This is why the first bonus tips, as I call it, is to realize that the one is a lie. There is no evidence supporting that there's one person that is a perfect match for us. None. But there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that support that we can fall in love with many people in this world. When I had my first child, I never thought I could love anyone else like him. And then I had my daughter, and I realized I can love her just as much, and it doesn't take anything away from my son. I then found that love is not limited to a person, and intimacy is something we can experience with many people if the condition of vulnerability and acceptance are there. And no matter who you date, it will require effort and some work to some extent. We all come with different backgrounds, cultures and wounds, and they might be more or less compatible, but it's a fact that effort is always required, and there are many people that you can be compatible with. This is an important one, because once you realize this, that it's not the only person you can love and have an amazing time with, it frees you up to be less fearful of loss, allow each other more freedom and self-expression, and this will often, if done consciously, make you feel closer. We all want to be seen, accepted and supported in expressing our desire and needs. But to give that to our partner, we need to first resolve the underlying fear of loss in ourselves. Okay, so things have gone a bit sore, but don't despair. It's normal for couples to be stuck in a vicious cycle, and they can actually be solved more easily than you think once you see the underlying cause. Let's look at the 3 tips that I promised you. Tip number 1, understanding attachment styles. The most common factor in relationships that go bad are attachment wounds. Some people feel easily anxious because they had caregivers or close attachments that were not consistent at meeting their needs. So they become fearful of loss or not actually their needs being met. We call this anxious attachment style, or the wave, as they are often up and down emotionally and can feel very overwhelming for the other extreme, which we'll talk about now. On the other end of the spectrum are the people that are avoidant attached. They learned that they could not really count on other caregivers or other people to fulfill their needs, and they just had to take care of themselves. They find it hard to trust others and to be emotionally connected, so they often retreat. They often want a lot of space, and more so when they feel stressed or overwhelmed. They think that they have to deal with their problems on their own and will often not reach out. These two opposite attachment styles can find it very difficult to be together, as the anxious attachment one needs a lot of closeness and reassurance to feel safe, while the avoidance needs space and often does not feel comfortable with the emotional closeness. We are not one or the other, we are different places on this spectrum, and different partners of course trigger more or less of this in us. If your attachment style are not compatible, then you can work on it, but it's often an uphill battle if you're opposite sides of the extreme. Unless you both do individual therapy or work to resolve your childhood wounds, it's unlikely it will become an easy flourishing relationship. Now there's a big grey area where we don't look at the extremes avoidant or extreme anxious attached. In this grey area, you can do a lot to fix or save a relationship. I'll go into great detail on how to identify your own and your partner's attachment styles and how to create intimacy with different attachment styles in my ebook on my website. But for now, let's look at a few practical ideas that you can take away today. If your partner is anxiously attached, then it's important for them to know that you'll be there for them in times of need and that you value them and that you will not leave them. You can express this in both your words and action, and it's important that you do both. You might say, I love spending time with you and there's no one I'd rather be with in this moment than you. And you can follow it up by doing her attachment language for her. And we cover attachment language both in another video but also in detail. Most relationship conflicts come from the question, will you be there for me when I need you? And that is left unanswered, and your partner therefore feel anxious that you might leave them or will not really be there for them. Even conflict that sometimes seem totally unrelated are often fueled by this underlying anxiety. A solution could also be to find an EFT, emotional focus therapist, that work with attachment issues as a specialist. I use these tools in my couples therapy. Tip number 2, expressing boundaries. If you want to know how to save a relationship, then you first need to understand what might have got you to this destructive place in the first place. Otherwise, how can you avoid it going forward? And we covered attachment issues above, so hopefully you've dealt with that by now. One of the most common reasons for resentment and feeling distant in a relationship is when our boundaries have been continuously violated. We or our partner might not have expressed our boundaries for various reasons, such as we are not aware of our own boundaries because we have not been used to expressing them. We can't sense them, that they've been overstepped until it might be too late and we feel angry, resentful, or we don't know how to express and enforce our boundaries even when we are aware of them. Or we simply know them but feel other people's needs are more important than our own boundaries. Firstly, remember, offering boundaries is a gift to your partner and relationship. And you might think, why? Because it helps the relationship not drift into resentment, and it allows your partner to feel more free, knowing that you can look out for yourself so they don't have to do it all the time. Now let's address each of these points I just mentioned above. If you can learn to set and enforce your boundaries in a firm and loving way, then your relationship will quickly be restored to a much more connected place. So the first one was, we're not aware of our boundaries. We've often become so used to our boundaries being overstepped as children that we're not even aware of them, what they are, how to sense them, or even how to express them. So the first step is to become aware of your boundaries and the sensation that are triggered when you're violated. And again, I cover this in great detail in my ebook. But in essence, you learn to notice emotions and sensations that tell you when boundaries are violated, and by knowing them and being aware of them, you can quickly get to know your boundaries and when they're being pushed. The next one is, we can't sense that they've been overstepped until it's too late. And again, that comes back to, we are not taught to listen to a sensation, and most of them are on autopilot, like hunger, temperature, breathing, and so on. But if we practice paying close attention to our bodies and the sensations, like through mindfulness and body dance, then we can sense quickly when something is off balance and that we need to pay attention. It's our bodily sensations that first warn us of violations of our boundaries: a tense stomach, a flush of the heart, an increase in heart rate, feeling hot. Whatever your signs are, once you know them, you can stop violation before it happens. And let's look at the next one. We don't know how to express and enforce our boundaries. That's a common one. It might be hard for you to communicate your boundaries for a lot of different reasons. You might have been violated so much that you simply disassociated. You might have been taught not to upset others or be worried about conflict, or there could be so many reasons. Remind yourself that sharing your boundaries is the kindest thing that you can do for someone else and for your relationship. You are teaching them how to connect with you and have a meaningful relationship rather than risking resentment. When you communicate your boundaries, it's very important that you're calm, vulnerable, and specific. So let's look at how this actually looks like in practice. If you're triggered and not calm, your emotional reaction will likely trigger the other person and they'll not be able to hear what you're communicating. So being in a calm place when you're communicating this is key. If you're triggered, then wait until you calmed yourself down. You can also say stop or simply just move away if you need a break to calm yourself down. If you can't, then there will be instances where you must communicate your boundaries while being triggered, but try to avoid it as much as possible. Next one, be specific. If the other person doesn't know what you mean, then they can't really respect your boundary. So here's an example of not to do first. I hate that I can't step inside the door before you attack me with your moaning. This is not calm, so your partner will likely either attack back or get defensive. Also, it's not very specific, so it's unclear what the violation is and what you want instead. Let's look at how to do this better instead with a new example. I feel really overwhelmed early when I step inside the door, and within 10 seconds you told me I had not done the dishes this morning. I'm so overworked and don't get a break all day. When I come home, I need 15 minutes of space to settle in before I can hear you. It's important to me that you respect that boundary, and then I'll also be able to hear you much better. I can then let you know when I've arrived mentally and emotionally, and then we can engage. Wow. Can you see how this is communicating in a vulnerable and calm way, as we start by explaining the impact on us that we are overwhelmed rather than saying that we hate. It's also specific, as we say it's too much to get requests within 10 seconds of coming in the door, and we need 15 minutes, and we'll let them know when we're ready. Now try this yourself with your partner and see how it works. Sit down together when you both feel calm and exchange a boundary in a calm and vulnerable and specific way. It's fine to write it down beforehand if that makes it easier for you. I used to do that. Let's look at the next one. We feel other needs are more important than our boundaries. We are often taught to ignore our own needs at the expense of others and to make them feel good or not hurt their feelings. However good intentions your caregivers had, this is not a constructive way to relate to others. Ignoring our own needs and boundaries never leads to intimacy and connection. So the most connecting you can do for yourself and your partner is to share your needs and your boundaries. Only then can you connect and feel intimate through shared vulnerability and experience acceptance from them. Let's look at tip number 3, expressing needs. And actually I just realized that this video is getting very long, so I will cover actually needs in the next video instead. And really learning to sense and express our needs is key to close relationships. So like I said, check out the next video that I'll publish next week. If you like this video, don't forget to like, leave a comment or subscribe if you want to get more weekly tips when new videos come out. Take care and see you in the next video.